The sun blazed mercilessly over the Montana territory, as Zara Holloway wiped the sweat from her brow with a dusty sleeve, squinting at the broken fence line that marked the boundary of her struggling ranch. The 3 years since her father's death had taught her resilience, but the constant battle against nature, bandits, and bad luck was wearing her down like water on stone. She jammed her shovel into the hard earth with frustration, knowing the cattle would wander if she couldn't fix the fence before nightfall. Zara's 25 years had hardened her in ways she never expected when she inherited the Diamond H Ranch in 1873. The neighboring ranchers had given her 6 months before she'd be forced to sell. 3 years later, she was still here, though some days like today, with 12 fence posts down after last night's storm, she wondered how much longer she could hold on. She paused to ready her honey-brown hair, which had escaped its practical braid, when she heard the slow, rhythmic sound of hoofbeats approaching from the west. Instinctively, her hand moved to the revolver at her hip. A woman alone couldn't be too careful, especially this far from town. The rider appeared over the rise, silhouetted against the late afternoon sky. A tall man on a sturdy chestnut gelding, moving at an unhurried pace. As he drew closer, Zara noted his worn denim pants, faded blue shirt, and the slight tilt of his hat that shaded his eyes from the sun. He rode with an odd posture slightly favoring his right side. "Afternoon, madam," he called when he was within earshot, his voice carrying a hint of southern drawl. "Looks like you've got yourself some trouble with that fence line." Zara didn't lower her hand from her revolver. "Just passing through?" she asked, her tone making it clear that's what she expected him to do. He reined his horse to a stop about 20 feet from her. "Name's Hunter Quincy. I've been hired on at the R. He nodded toward the neighboring ranch that bordered her property to the north. "Mr. Reynolds mentioned you might need some help around your place." "Old Reynolds said that, did he?" Zara couldn't hide her skepticism. Theodore Reynolds had been trying to buy her out since the day her father died. "And what exactly did he say about me?" The stranger hunter smiled slightly. "Said you were stubborn as a mule and twice as hardworking." He dismounted with a careful movement that revealed a stiffness in his right leg. "Also mentioned you might shoot me if I approached unannounced, so consider this my announcement." Zara noted how he put his weight on his left leg as he stood beside his horse. "I don't need charity, Mr. Quincy. Good thing I'm not offering any." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the ends and eyes the color of coffee. "Reynolds is paying me to ride the boundary lines and fixing fence benefits both ranches, so you could say I'm just being efficient." He had a point, though Zara wasn't about to admit it. She studied him more carefully now. He was younger than she'd first thought, early 30s, perhaps, with a strong jaw darkened by stubble and shoulders broad enough to suggest he was no stranger to hard work. But it was the way he moved that held her attention deliberately, as if each step was considered before it was taken. "What happened to your leg?" she asked bluntly. If he was offended by her directness, he didn't show it. "War injury, mini-A ball at Cold Harbor." He patted his right thigh. "Doctors wanted to take it, but I disagreed rather strongly with their assessment. The war's been over for 8 years. "Yes, madam, it has." He looked at the broken fence posts. "Mind if I take a look at what needs doing here?" Zara hesitated, then nodded curtly. She watched as he limped over to examine the damage, noting how he tested each post with strong, calloused hands. "Storm got it good," he observed. "I count 15 posts down, not 12. Zara frowned. "I can handle it." Hunter glanced at her, then back at the fence. "Never suggested you couldn't, Miss Holloway, but I've got tools on my horse and an extra pair of hands makes lighter work." "How do you know my name?" "Small territory. Word gets around." He turned to his horse and began untying a set of tools from behind his saddle. "Reynolds mentioned your father was Jeremiah Holloway. He had a good reputation." "Yes, he did," Zara said, a familiar ache squeezing her heart at the mention of her father. For several moments, they worked in silence. Zara was reluctantly impressed by Hunter's efficiency despite his bad leg. He moved methodically, setting the new posts with practiced skill. His limp was pronounced but didn't seem to hinder him. He simply worked at his own pace, steady and thorough. By the time the sun was low on the horizon, they had reset 8 posts and strung new wire between them. Hunter had removed his shirt in the heat, working in his undershirt that clung to his broad shoulders with sweat. Zara found herself stealing glances at him, noting the scars that marked his tanned forearms and the concentrated expression on his face as he worked. "Getting dark," she finally said, looking at the remaining posts. "The rest can wait till morning." Hunter nodded, wiping his brow with his forearm. "Should hold for the night. Your cattle won't wander if they're well fed." "They are," Zara said defensively. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth. Wasn't suggesting otherwise. He gathered his tools and returned them to his saddlebags. Zara hesitated, then said, "There's stew on the stove. Be ashamed to waste it, and you've earned a meal." He looked surprised by the offer, but nodded. "Much obliged." The walk back to her cabin was quiet, with the sounds of Montana evening surrounding them, crickets beginning their chorus, the distant lowing of cattle, the whisper of the wind through the pines. Hunter's horse followed obediently, and Zara noticed again how deliberately Hunter moved, placing each step with care. "You move careful," she observed aloud. He glanced at her, something unreadable flashing in his eyes. "Some might say slow, not weak," she found herself saying. "Careful. There's a difference." For the first time, a genuine smile crossed his face, reaching all the way to his eyes. "Yes, madam, there certainly is." The cabin came into view, a sturdy structure of hewn logs with a stone chimney from which a thin wisp of smoke still rose. Zara had left the stew simmering before going to check the fence line. The small stable stood nearby, housing her 2 horses and the milk cow. "You can leave your horse in the corral," she said, heading toward the cabin door. "There's water in the trough and some hay." Hunter nodded, leading his horse to the corral. Zara watched from the porch as he removed the saddle with practiced movements, his hands gentle as he rubbed down the animal and checked its hooves. There was something reassuring about the way he handled the horse, patient and thorough. Inside the cabin, Zara stirred the stew and added more wood to the cook stove. The one-room structure was neat and functional, with a curtain dividing her sleeping area from the main living space. Her father's old rocking chair sat by the hearth, and shelves lined one wall, holding books, preserved food, and various household items. When Hunter entered, he removed his hat respectfully, his eyes taking in the cabin with appreciation rather than judgment. "This is fine craftsmanship," he said, running a hand over the smooth pine table that her father had built. "Dovetail joints on the corners. Man who made this knew his trade." "My father built most of the furniture," Zara said, placing 2 bowls on the table. "He was a carpenter before he was a rancher. It shows." Hunter washed his hands in the basin by the door before taking a seat at her invitation. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the stew rich with vegetables from Zara's garden and beef from her own stock. She noticed that Hunter ate with the same deliberate care with which he moved, savoring each bite, not rushing despite what must have been considerable hunger after the day's work. "This is excellent," he said after a time. "Been a while since I've had a home-cooked meal this good." "Where were you before the Triple R?" Zara asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "All over. Texas, Kansas, Colorado." He took a sip of water. Worked cattle drives mostly, some ranch work when my leg would allow it. And before the war, a shadow passed over his face. Family had a horse farm in Virginia. Nothing left of it now. Zara nodded, understanding the unspoken loss. My father brought us here from Pennsylvania in '67. Mother died of fever on the journey. It was just the two of us until his heart gave out 3 years ago. No brothers or sisters. She shook her head. Just me. The neighbors thought I'd sell right away, but she gestured around the cabin. This is home. It's a good piece of land, Hunter agreed. Seen you've got the south pasture planted with alfalfa. Smart move. Fetches a good price when the other ranchers' grass dries up in August, Zara said, surprised he had noticed. Though this year's been drier than most, I'm worried about water. Hunter nodded thoughtfully. Reynolds mentioned you've got a creek running through your property. It's running low. I've been thinking about damming part of it to create a reservoir, but I haven't had the time. That's good thinking. He hesitated, then added, I could help with that if you'd be amenable. I did some similar work in Colorado. Zara studied him, trying to determine his angle. Why would you help me? You work for Reynolds. Hunter met her gaze directly. Reynolds hired me to manage his herds and maintain his property lines, which includes keeping good relations with neighbors. Besides, he smiled slightly. I admire what you're doing here. Not many would have the grit to hold on when things get tough. Zara wasn't used to straightforward admiration, especially from a man. Most of the cowboys and ranchers in the area either dismissed her efforts or tried to court her for the land rather than her company. I'll think about it, she said finally, rising to clear the dishes. Hunter stood as well, moving to the door. I should get back. Reynolds will be wondering where I've gone off to. He placed his hat on his head. Thank you for the meal, Miss Holloway. Zara, she found herself saying. If we're going to be neighbors, you might as well use my name. His smile deepened, creating lines around his eyes that spoke of sun and laughter. Zara, then. I'll be by tomorrow to finish that fence line if that's acceptable. She nodded, suddenly aware of how long it had been since she'd had company in her cabin. That would be fine, Mr. Quincy. Hunter, he corrected gently. Hunter, she agreed. After he had ridden away, disappearing into the gathering darkness, Zara found herself standing on the porch longer than necessary, listening to the fading sound of hoofbeats. There was something about the cowboy with the bad leg that intrigued her, perhaps. It was the careful way he moved, or the respect in his eyes when he looked at her land. Whatever it was, she found herself looking forward to tomorrow in a way she hadn't for a very long time. True to his word, Hunter arrived the next morning as Zara was finishing her coffee on the porch. The sun was just cresting the eastern mountains, painting the landscape in gold and rose. He rode up with the same measured pace as before, but today he had a packhorse trailing behind him, laden with fence posts and tools. Morning, he called, raising a hand in greeting. Thought we might finish that fence line before the heat of the day. Zara nodded, setting her coffee cup aside. I'll saddle my horse. They worked well together, falling into an unspoken rhythm. Hunter would set the posts, his strength making the task look easier than Zara knew it to be, while she strung the wire and secured it with the efficiency of long practice. By midday, the fence was complete, sturdy enough to withstand the next storm, with reinforcements at the points most vulnerable to flooding. As they stood back to admire their work, Hunter wiped the sweat from his brow. That should hold. It will, Zara agreed. She hesitated, then added, I've been thinking about your offer to help with the creek. Hunter waited, not pushing. I'd like to see it done before winter, she continued. And I can pay you for your time, not much, but something. He shook his head. No need for payment. Reynolds gives me Sundays off. I could work on it then if you'd be willing to provide the noon meal. Zara studied him, trying to decipher his motivation. "Why are you really helping me, Hunter?" His expression turned thoughtful. "When I came back from the war, there were people who saw only what I couldn't do anymore. They looked at my leg and made up their minds about my worth." He adjusted his hat, shading his eyes from the sun. "I guess I recognize something in you, that I understand the determination to prove everyone wrong about what you're capable of." His honesty disarmed her. "Sunday then," she said. "I'll make sure there's a good meal waiting." Hunter's help proved invaluable over the weeks that followed. Each Sunday, he would arrive at dawn, work until midday when they would share a meal at her table, and then continue until dusk. The dam took shape gradually, a sturdy structure of logs, stone, and earth that created a small reservoir feeding into an irrigation channel he helped her dig to the south pasture. During these Sundays, Zara learned more about Hunter Quincy than she had intended. He spoke little of the war, but she gathered he had been a cavalry officer. He had a quick mind for engineering, and a patient way of explaining his ideas that never made her feel inferior for her lack of formal education. He spoke occasionally of his childhood in Virginia, of a father who bred horses and a mother who insisted he learn to read Shakespeare and Emerson alongside learning to ride and rope. "What about you?" he asked one Sunday in late July as they sat in the shade of a cottonwood, taking a brief rest during the hottest part of the day. "What was Jeremiah Holloway like as a father?" Zara smiled at the memory. "Demanding but fair. He taught me everything he knew: carpentry, ranching, even how to shoot and track. My mother would have been scandalized." She plucked a blade of grass, twirling it between her fingers. "He used to say that out here, practical skills mattered more than social graces." "Wise man," Hunter commented. "He was." She looked out over her land, the grass golden under the summer sun. "Sometimes I wonder what he'd think of how I'm managing things." "I expect he'd be proud," Hunter said simply. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding that went beyond words. In that moment, Zara realized she had come to look forward to Sundays not just for the help Hunter provided, but for his company. The thought was both comforting and unsettling. As August brought even hotter days, and the threat of drought became more pressing, the value of their dam project became evident. While other ranchers were forced to drive their cattle miles to water, Zara's stock had access to the reservoir. The irrigation channel kept her south pasture green when others were turning brown, and word began to spread about the innovation at the Diamond H Ranch. One evening, as Hunter was preparing to leave, Theodore Reynolds himself rode up to Zara's cabin. He was a portly man in his 50s with a florid face and small, calculating eyes. "Evening, Miss Holloway," he called from his horse, not bothering to dismount. His gaze flickered to Hunter. "Quincy, didn't realize you were out this way." "Mr. Reynolds," Hunter acknowledged with a nod. "I've been helping Miss Holloway with some water management projects," Hunter explained evenly, "on my own time." Reynolds' eyes narrowed slightly. "I see." He turned his attention back to Zara. "I came by to make you another offer on your land, Miss Holloway. In light of the drought, I'm willing to be generous, $5 an acre cash." Zara kept her expression neutral, though inside she was seething. $5 was well below market value, and Reynolds knew it. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Reynolds, but as you can see, we're managing the drought quite effectively here." Reynolds' gaze swept over the newly constructed dam and irrigation channel, visible from where they stood. His mouth tightened. "That's quite an undertaking for a woman alone." "Miss Holloway has considerable skill," Hunter interjected before Zara could respond, "and vision that many in these parts lack." Reynolds shot Hunter a sharp look. "Well, the offer stands. Though I should warn you, Miss Holloway, that water rights in this territory can be complicated. Might want to make sure that dam of yours isn't interfering with downstream users." The threat was thinly veiled, and Zara felt a flash of anger. "The creek runs through my property, Mr. Reynolds, and I've left plenty of flow for downstream." "Just a friendly word of caution," Reynolds said with an insincere smile. He tipped his hat. "Good evening to you both." As he rode away, Zara turned to Hunter with concern. "Can he cause trouble over the water?" Hunter watched Reynolds' retreating figure thoughtfully. "He can try, but you're within your rights. The dam doesn't block the creek entirely, and you're using the water on your own land." He turned to her. "But he's not a man who takes defeat easily. You should be careful." "I always am," Zara said, her chin lifting slightly. "I've dealt with Reynolds for 3 years now." Hunter nodded, but his expression remained troubled. "I'll keep my ears open at the ranch, see what he might be planning." As he mounted his horse to leave, Zara felt a sudden reluctance to see him go. "Sunday?" she asked. His face softened. "Sunday," he confirmed. But Reynolds' visit had cast a shadow over their progress. Zara found herself watching the horizon more carefully in the days that followed, wondering if the neighboring rancher would make good on his implied threat. On Wednesday, she rode into the town of Sierra Vista for supplies. The small settlement served as the trading hub for the surrounding ranches, with a general store, saloon, blacksmith, and a handful of other businesses lining its single dusty street. As Zara tied her horse outside the general store, she became aware of eyes following her. Mrs. Miller, the storekeeper's wife, watched her with unusual interest as she gathered her supplies. "Heard you've had some help out at your place, Mrs." Miller said as she wrapped Zara's purchases in brown paper. "That new foreman from the Triple R." Zara kept her expression neutral. "Mr. Quincy has been kind enough to assist with some projects, on his own time." Mrs. Miller raised her eyebrows. "Is that what they're calling it these days?" "Assisting with projects." Heat rose to Zara's cheeks. "It's exactly what it is, Mrs. Miller. Nothing more." The older woman looked skeptical. "Just be careful, dear. A woman alone has to guard her reputation. And that Quincy fellow, handsome as he may be, is still a mystery around these parts. Some say he was more than just a soldier in the war." "What do you mean?" Zara asked, her curiosity piqued despite her annoyance. Mrs. Miller leaned closer. "Jim Baker was passing through Virginia last year, said he heard the name Quincy mentioned. Something about a cavalry officer who did some scouting behind enemy lines. Dangerous work, the kind that changes a man." Zara thought of Hunter's measured movements, the watchfulness in his eyes. "War changes everyone who fights in it," she said simply, gathering her packages. "Good day, Mrs. Miller." Outside, she nearly collided with Sheriff Patterson, a grizzled man in his 60s who had known her father. "Miss Holloway," he greeted her, tipping his hat. "Just the person I wanted to see." "Sheriff," she acknowledged. "Is there a problem?" He glanced around the street, then lowered his voice. "Wanted to give you a heads up. Reynolds was in my office yesterday, asking about water rights and property boundaries. Seemed particularly interested in whether that dam you're building requires any special permissions." Zara's heart sank. "And does it?" "Not as far as I can tell. Creek runs through your land and you're not blocking it completely." He studied her with concern. "But Reynolds has friends in the territorial office. Just watch yourself." "Thank you for the warning," Zara said, her mind already racing with potential problems. The sheriff nodded. "Your father was a good man. I'd hate to see his daughter run off her land by underhanded tactics." He hesitated. "That Quincy fellow who's been helping you, what do you know about him?" "Enough to trust him," Zara said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. Patterson seemed to accept this. "Good. You might need allies in the days ahead." Zara rode home with a growing sense of unease. Reynolds was clearly unhappy about the improvements to her ranch, perhaps seeing them as an obstacle to his plans to acquire her land. And now, the town was gossiping about Hunter's presence at her property, adding complications she hadn't anticipated. When Sunday came, she found herself watching the road with more anticipation than usual. Hunter arrived as the sun was clearing the eastern hills, but his expression was grim as he dismounted. "Reynolds fired me yesterday," he said without preamble. Zara's heart sank. "Because of me." "Because you've been helping here." Hunter shook his head. "Not directly. He claimed I wasn't paying enough attention to my duties at the Triple R, but it's clear what really bothered him." He ran a hand through his hair, leaving it slightly disheveled. "He also mentioned he'd be damming the creek himself, upstream on his property. Said if you want water, you should accept his offer for your land." Zara felt a flash of anger. "He can't do that. It would dry up half my grazing land even with our reservoir." "I know." Hunter's jaw was set in a hard line. "That's why I came to warn you, and to tell you I'm heading to Sierra Vista tomorrow to speak with a lawyer I know. Reynolds may have influence, but what he's threatening isn't legal." Zara studied him, noting the determination in his eyes. "You don't have to fight my battles, Hunter." "I know that too," he said quietly, "but I want to." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. "What will you do now, for work?" A small smile touched his lips. "As it happens, the Diamond Bar Ranch is looking for an experienced foreman. It's south of here, about a day's ride. The owner, James Foster, already made me an offer." "That's good," Zara said, trying to ignore the disappointment that washed over her at the thought of him leaving the area. Hunter must have read something in her expression. "It's close enough that I could still ride over on Sundays," he said carefully, "to check on the dam, if you'd want me to." Their eyes met, and Zara felt a warmth spread through her chest. "I would," she said simply. They spent the day working on reinforcing the dam, both aware of the new urgency to their task. If Reynolds followed through on his threat, they needed to ensure that every drop of water was properly managed. By late afternoon, they had completed most of the critical work, and Zara invited Hunter to stay for supper. As they sat at her table, the conversation turned to more personal matters than usual. "What will you do if Reynolds does dam the creek?" Hunter asked as he passed her the plate of cornbread. Zara considered the question seriously. "Fight it legally if I can, adapt if I must." She met his gaze. "I'm not leaving this land, Hunter. It's all I have." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "There might be another solution." The Diamond Bar borders a river with steady flow year-round. Foster mentioned he's been considering a partnership with neighboring ranches for irrigation projects. "A partnership?" Zara raised an eyebrow. "Most ranchers around here aren't known for sharing. Foster's different. He came out west from Boston with ideas about cooperative farming. Seems to be making it work." Hunter took a sip of coffee. "I could introduce you if you'd be interested." Zara thought about it. "I might be, though Reynolds won't be happy about it." "Reynolds doesn't own this territory, whatever he might think." Hunter's voice held a steel edge she hadn't heard before. "And he doesn't own you." The conviction in his words touched something deep within her. For 3 years she had stood alone against pressure and doubt, determined to prove she could succeed where others expected her to fail. Having someone beside her, believing in her capability, was a new and powerful feeling. "Thank you," she said softly. Hunter looked at her questioningly. "For seeing me as I am," she clarified. "Not as someone to be rescued or pitied." His expression softened. "How could anyone see you as anything but remarkable?" The words hung between them, charged with meaning neither was quite ready to acknowledge. Zara felt her cheeks warm, unused to such direct admiration. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching horses, several of them, moving fast. Hunter was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. "Stay here," he said, his voice low and commanding. Zara ignored him, grabbing her rifle from beside the door and following him onto the porch. In the fading light, she could make out 4 riders approaching from the direction of the Triple R. As they drew closer, she recognized Reynolds at the lead, flanked by 3 of his cowhands. "Looks like Reynolds decided not to wait on his plans," Hunter muttered, positioning himself slightly in front of Zara despite her protests. Reynolds reined his horse to a stop in front of the cabin, his men spreading out in a semicircle that left Zara uneasy. None had drawn weapons yet, but their posture was menacing. "Miss Holloway," Reynolds called, not bothering to dismount. "I see you're still entertaining my former employee." "State your business, Reynolds," Zara said coldly, keeping her rifle visible but lowered. Reynolds' smile didn't reach his eyes. "Just thought I'd inform you personally that work begins tomorrow on my new dam. As the upstream property owner, I have certain rights to the water that flows through my land." "You have rights to reasonable use," Hunter countered, his voice steady. "Not to deprive downstream users entirely." Reynolds' gaze hardened as it shifted to Hunter. "I don't believe I was addressing you, Quincy. In fact, I'm surprised to find you still in the territory. There are those who might question the presence of a former Confederate officer with your particular history." Hunter didn't flinch, but Zara felt him tense beside her. "My history is no secret, Reynolds, and it has no bearing on water rights in Montana territory." "Perhaps not," Reynolds conceded with false pleasantness. "But it might interest Miss Holloway to know exactly what kind of man she's allowing on her property." He turned to Zara. "Did he tell you he rode with Mosby's Rangers? Special operations, they called it. Some called it something else." Zara kept her expression neutral, though her mind was racing. She had heard of Mosby's Rangers, a Confederate cavalry unit known for their unconventional tactics behind Union lines. Some considered them heroes, others called them outlaws. "Whatever Mr. Quincy did during the war has no bearing on the present situation," she said firmly. "And you have no right to block the creek." Reynolds laughed, a harsh sound in the evening air. "Rights are for those who can enforce them, Miss Holloway. I've already spoken with the territorial magistrate and he sees no issue with my plans." His expression hardened. "My offer for your land stands until tomorrow noon. After that, I can't guarantee there'll be enough water to sustain your operation, and the price will reflect that new reality." Hunter took a step forward. "That sounds remarkably like a threat, Reynolds." One of Reynolds' men moved his hand toward his gun, but Reynolds stopped him with a gesture. "Just business, Quincy. Miss Holloway is a businesswoman. She understands how these things work." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Think about it, Miss Holloway. $5 an acre is more than fair, given the circumstances." With that, he wheeled his horse around, his men following as they rode back toward the Triple R. When they were out of earshot, Zara turned to Hunter. "Is it true? About Mosby's Rangers?" Hunter met her gaze steadily. "Yes. I served under Colonel Mosby for the last 2 years of the war. Special operations behind enemy lines." "Doing what exactly?" He didn't look away. "Disrupting supply lines, gathering intelligence, sometimes taking prisoners." He paused. "It was war, Zara. I did what I thought was right at the time." She studied him, seeing the man she had come to know over the past weeks, thoughtful, principled, patient. Whatever he had done in the war, the Hunter Quincy standing before her now was someone she trusted. "Reynolds is trying to drive a wedge between us," she said finally. "That's all that matters to me right now." Relief flashed across Hunter's face, quickly replaced by determination. We need to move quickly. If Reynolds starts damming the creek tomorrow, we don't have much time. Zara nodded, her mind already working on solutions. You mentioned James Foster and the Diamond Bar. How quickly could we arrange a meeting? First thing tomorrow, Hunter said. I can ride there tonight. No, Zara said firmly. It's too dark and the terrain is treacherous. We'll go at first light. She hesitated, then added, together. Hunter looked as if he might argue, then nodded. Together. They departed before dawn, riding south toward the Diamond Bar Ranch. The journey took most of the day, giving them time to discuss strategies and contingencies. Hunter explained more about James Foster's approach to ranching, which emphasized cooperation among smaller operators to compete with the larger outfits like the Triple R. Foster believes the future of ranching in Montana depends on small to medium operators working together, Hunter explained as they rode. Sharing resources, coordinating cattle drives, even pooling funds for improvements that benefit multiple ranches. It sounds idealistic, Zara commented, though she couldn't deny the appeal of the concept. Hunter shrugged. Maybe, but he's making it work. The Diamond Bar is profitable, and he's helped several neighboring ranches improve their operations. They arrived at the Diamond Bar in late afternoon. The ranch was larger than Zara had expected, with well-maintained buildings and extensive corrals filled with quality stock. James Foster himself greeted them, a tall, lean man in his 40s, with an educated Eastern accent that hadn't been entirely smoothed away by his years in Montana. After introductions, they sat in Foster's comfortable office while Zara explained her situation with Reynolds and the creek. Foster listened attentively, occasionally making notes. When she finished, he nodded thoughtfully. Reynolds has been pushing boundaries, literal and figurative, for years. He's used to getting his way through intimidation and his connections with territorial officials. Can he legally dam the creek? Zara asked directly. Foster frowned. Technically, no. Water rights in the territory follow the doctrine of prior appropriation, first in time, first in right. Since your father established the ranch before Reynolds acquired the neighboring property, you have senior water rights. He sighed. But challenging him legally would take time and money you may not have. So what options do I have? Zara tried to keep the frustration from her voice. Several, actually, Foster said, surprising her with his optimism. First, I'm prepared to offer you immediate access to water from the Diamond Bar if Reynolds follows through on his threat. We can arrange temporary rights through my property to the river. Zara blinked in surprise. That's extremely generous, Mr. Foster. He waved away her thanks. It's practical. Reynolds' tactics threaten all independent ranchers in the region. If he succeeds in forcing you out, others will follow. He glanced at Hunter. Quincy here tells me you've already constructed a reservoir and irrigation system. That shows foresight and innovation, exactly the kind of rancher I want to work with. There's more, Hunter added, exchanging a look with Foster. Tell her about the association. Foster nodded, leaning forward in his chair. I've been organizing a formal association of independent ranchers. Together, we can negotiate better prices for our beef, share the cost of improvements, and most importantly present a united front against the larger outfits like the Triple R. And you want me to join this association? Zara asked. Very much so, Foster confirmed. Your ranch's location is strategic, and from what Hunter tells me, you're exactly the kind of forward-thinking rancher we need. Zara glanced at Hunter, surprised by his apparent faith in her abilities. He met her gaze with quiet confidence. I'd like to think about it, she said finally. But the immediate concern is Reynolds' threat to dam the creek tomorrow. Foster nodded. Of course. As for that, I suggest a two-pronged approach. First, We'll file a formal complaint with the Territorial Water Commissioner today. I have a good relationship with him, and he can at least delay Reynolds' plans." "And second?" Hunter asked. A slight smile crossed Foster's face. "Second, I believe it's time the Ranchers Association made its public debut. Nothing quite like a show of solidarity to give a man like Reynolds pause." By the time they left the Diamond Bar, darkness had fallen, and Foster insisted they stay the night. They departed at first light the next day, but not alone. Foster himself, along with 6 other ranchers from the newly formed Montana Independent Ranchers Association, rode with them. As they approached the Diamond H, Zara felt a surge of emotion at the sight of her land. Whatever happened with Reynolds, she was no longer fighting alone. They arrived to find activity at the northern boundary where the creek entered her property from the Triple R. Reynolds had wasted no time. A crew of at least a dozen men were already at work, moving earth and positioning logs for a dam that would indeed divert most of the water away from Zara's land. Reynolds himself was supervising, and his expression darkened when he saw the approaching riders. He rode out to meet them, flanked by several of his men. "This is private property, Foster," he called as they approached. "You and your friends are trespassing." "We're on Miss Holloway's land, Reynolds," Foster replied calmly. "And we're here to inform you that the Territorial Water Commissioner has issued a temporary injunction against your dam project." Reynolds' face flushed with anger. "I don't see any official paperwork." "It's being delivered to your ranch house as we speak," Foster said. "But more importantly, I wanted to introduce you to the Montana Independent Ranchers Association." He gestured to the men with him. "We've unanimously voted to support Miss Holloway's water rights claim and to provide whatever assistance she needs to maintain her operation." Reynolds glanced at the ranchers, clearly calculating the implications. These weren't just any ranchers, they represented significant land holdings and influence in the territory. "This doesn't concern any of you," he said finally, though with less certainty. One of the ranchers, an older man Zara recognized as Edward Whitman from the Lazy W, spoke up. "Water rights concern all of us, Reynolds. Set a precedent with Miss Holloway, and none of our claims are secure." Reynolds' gaze shifted to Hunter, who had remained silent beside Zara. "This you're doing, Quincy. Turning the territory against me." "You did that yourself," Hunter replied evenly. "Miss Holloway has a legal right to her share of the water, and these men recognize that protecting her rights protects their own." For a moment, Zara thought Reynolds might order his men to continue working despite the opposition. But after a tense silence, he gave a curt nod to his foreman. "Pack it up for now," he ordered. "We'll continue this discussion after I've reviewed this supposed injunction." As Reynolds' men began dismantling their equipment, Foster turned to Zara with a satisfied smile. "Round 1 to the association, but this isn't over." "I know," Zara said, watching Reynolds with wary eyes, "but it's a start." The ranchers dispersed after extracting a promise from Zara to attend the association's formal meeting the following week. Soon, only Hunter remained with her, watching as the last of Reynolds' men departed. "Thank you," Zara said when they were alone, "for taking me to Foster, for believing in me." Hunter turned to her, his expression earnest. "You've earned that belief, what you've accomplished here on your own." He gestured to the ranch around them. "It's remarkable, Zara." The way he said her name sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the afternoon sun. For the first time, she allowed herself to fully acknowledge the feelings that had been growing within her over the past weeks. "Will you stay?" she asked, surprising herself with the directness of the question. "At the Diamond Bar, I mean. Foster seems to value you." Hunter's eyes never left hers. "He offered me the foreman position permanently. It's a good opportunity." "Yes," Zara agreed, trying to ignore the tightness in her chest. You should take it. I'm considering it. He took a step closer to her. But there's something I need to know first. What's that? Zara asked, suddenly very aware of his proximity. If I stay in the territory, he said carefully, would you still welcome my visits, not just for help with the ranch, but for other reasons? Zara felt her heart quicken. What other reasons did you have in mind, Mr. Quincy? A smile touched his lips at her formal address. I find myself thinking about you, Miss Holloway, when we're apart, thinking about your determination, your intelligence. His voice softened. Your smile on the rare occasions you choose to share it. Zara found herself unable to look away from the intensity in his eyes. I've been known to smile more frequently in certain company, she admitted. Hunter's smile deepened. Is that so? It is. Zara took a breath, summoning her courage. And yes, I would welcome your visits. For whatever reasons brought you here. The moment stretched between them, full of possibility. Then Hunter reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wished, and took her hand in his. I should warn you, he said, his thumb tracing a gentle pattern on her palm, that my intentions may not remain entirely proper. A small laugh escaped her. I believe I can handle your intentions, Mr. Quincy, proper or otherwise. His expression grew serious. You should know everything, Zara. About the war, about what I did. She shook her head. The past is the past. I care about the man standing before me now, the one who fixes fences slowly but thoroughly, the one who sees value in what others dismiss. She squeezed his hand. The one who moves carefully, not weakly. Something in his expression shifted then, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. You see me, he said softly, as I am now, not as what the war made me. Yes, she said simply, just as you see me. The weeks that followed brought significant changes to the Diamond H Ranch. Zara joined the Montana Independent Ranchers Association, gaining access not only to water from the Diamond Bar, but also to shared resources for cattle drives and marketing. Reynolds, faced with the united opposition of the smaller ranchers and an official ruling from the Territorial Water Commissioner, reluctantly abandoned his dam project. Hunter accepted the position at the Diamond Bar, which was indeed only a day's ride from Zara's ranch. He came not just on Sundays now, but often midweek as well, helping with projects around her property and slowly, carefully, courting her with a patience that matched his deliberate movements. Their first kiss came on a crisp September evening as they sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple. Hunter had been telling her about his plans to help Foster expand the association to include ranchers from the neighboring territory. You found your purpose here, Zara observed, hearing the enthusiasm in his voice. Hunter turned to her, his eyes reflecting the golden light. I've found more than that, he said quietly. When he leaned toward her, she met him halfway. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepening with a hunger that surprised them both. His hand cradled her face with the same care he showed in all his movements, but there was nothing weak in the way he pulled her closer. As autumn turned to winter, Hunter's visits became more frequent. He would often stay overnight, sleeping on a bedroll by the fire, respecting the proprieties that even the frontier observed. But the looks that passed between them grew increasingly heated, and Zara found herself thinking of a future she hadn't dared imagine before. It was during the first heavy snow of December that Hunter finally spoke of that future directly. They had spent the day securing the barn and livestock against the storm, and now sat before the hearth in her cabin, the warmth of the fire a pleasant contrast to the howling wind outside. I won't be able to ride back to the Diamond Bar in this, Hunter said, looking out at the swirling snow. Foster will understand. You're welcome to stay, Zara said, handing him a cup of coffee. As always. He accepted the cup, but his expression was thoughtful. "I've been thinking, Zara. About us." She sat beside him, her heart quickening. "What about us?" Hunter set his coffee aside and took her hands in his. "I find myself reluctant to leave each time, and not just because of the weather." His thumbs traced patterns on her skin. "I want to build something with you, not just dams or fences, but a life." Zara felt a rush of emotion so powerful it nearly took her breath away. "Are you proposing, Hunter Quincy?" A smile touched his lips. "I believe I am, yes, though perhaps not as eloquently as you deserve." She laughed softly. "I've never had much use for eloquence. Honesty suits me better." "Then honestly," he said, his voice deepening, "I love you, Zara Holloway. Your strength, your determination, your heart. I want to wake up beside you every morning and work beside you every day. I want to build this ranch with you, to see what we can create together." Tears pricked at Zara's eyes, but she blinked them away. "And your position at the Diamond Bar? Foster already knows my intentions. He's offered me a partnership arrangement that would allow me to divide my time between both ranches. Eventually, we could join the operations if you were amenable." She considered this, impressed by his foresight. "You've thought this through." "I move carefully," he reminded her with a small smile, "not weakly." Zara reached up to touch his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "Yes," she said simply, his brow furrowed slightly. "Yes to what exactly?" "To all of it," she clarified, her smile widening. "To marriage, to partnership, to building something together." The joy that spread across his face was unlike anything she had seen before, transforming his features and lighting his eyes. When he kissed her, it was with a passion that spoke of promises and possibilities. They were married on New Year's Day, 1874, in a ceremony at the Diamond H Ranch, attended by members of the Ranchers Association and a few townsfolk from Sierra Vista who had come to respect Zara's determination. Reynolds was notably absent, though rumors had begun circulating that financial troubles might force him to sell portions of the Triple R in the spring. As Hunter had promised, they built their life together day by day, combining their skills and strengths to improve the ranch. With access to the association's resources and Hunter's engineering knowledge, they expanded the irrigation system to cover more of the property, increasing their grazing capacity and crop yield. By the summer of 1874, they had added a new wing to the cabin, creating a proper bedroom and expanding the main living area. Hunter's woodworking skills, learned from his father, complemented the carpentry knowledge Zara had gained from hers, and together they crafted furniture that was both beautiful and functional. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Hunter's careful planning and Zara's practical knowledge of the land created an operation that drew admiration from throughout the territory. When the fall cattle drive brought record prices for their stock, they used the proceeds to purchase additional acreage bordering their property land that Reynolds had indeed been forced to sell. Through it all, their partnership deepened into a love that sustained them through the challenges of ranch life. Hunter's leg pained him during cold weather and after long days in the saddle, but Zara never saw it as a weakness. His careful, deliberate movements became a metaphor for their approach to life together, thoughtful, purposeful, steady. In the spring of 1875, Zara discovered she was expecting their first child. Hunter's joy was palpable, though tempered with concern for the rigors of childbirth on the frontier. "We should hire additional help," he insisted as her pregnancy progressed. "You can't continue working at this pace." Zara, stubborn as ever, initially resisted. "Women have been having babies on the frontier since the first wagons rolled west. I'm perfectly capable of managing." "I have no doubt of your capability," Hunter assured her, his hand gentle on her growing belly. But there's no virtue in unnecessary struggle when we can afford help. In the end, she conceded, and they hired a young couple from Sierra Vista, Tom and Mary Wilkins, to assist with the ranch operations. Mary, who had trained as a midwife in St. Louis before coming west with her husband, proved an invaluable addition as Zara's time approached. Their son, Jeremiah Hunter Quincy, was born on a clear November morning in 1875. He had his father's dark hair and his mother's determined expression, and from his earliest days showed signs of inheriting both their stubborn natures. As Zara watched Hunter cradle their son with the same careful movements he brought to everything, she felt a completeness she had never imagined possible. The ranch that had once been her solitary burden had become the foundation of a family, a living legacy of what could be built with determination, vision, and love. In the years that followed, the Diamond H Ranch continued to flourish. The Montana Independent Ranchers Association expanded its influence, with Hunter and Zara both taking leadership roles. Their irrigation innovations became a model for other ranches in the territory, and Foster often brought visitors to see the system they had created. They welcomed a daughter, Elizabeth, in 1877, and another son, Thomas, in 1880. The cabin expanded again to accommodate their growing family, and the sounds of children's laughter became as much a part of the ranch as the lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the pines. Reynolds eventually sold the remainder of the Triple R and moved east, defeated by the changing dynamics of ranching in the territory. The Ranchers Association purchased much of his land, dividing it among members who had proven their commitment to sustainable practices. On the 10th anniversary of their marriage in 1884, Hunter and Zara stood on the porch of what was now a substantial ranch house, looking out over land that stretched further than it had when they began. Their children played in the yard, their livestock grazed on healthy pastures, and the creek, the subject of that first conflict, flowed steadily through an irrigation system that now served multiple ranches in the association. "Did you ever imagine this?" Hunter asked, his arm around her waist. At 45, his hair was touched with silver at the temples, and the lines around his eyes had deepened, but he still moved with the same careful deliberation that had first caught her attention. "Not all of it," Zara admitted, leaning into his embrace. At 36, she retained the strength and determination of her younger days, though experience had softened some of her sharper edges. "I was just trying to hold onto what my father built. I never dreamed of creating all this." Hunter's smile was warm as he looked down at her. "You underestimate yourself, even now. You had the vision, I just helped with the details." She shook her head, unwilling to let him diminish his contribution. "We built it together, your careful planning and my stubborn determination." "A good combination," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. The sound of their children's laughter drew their attention to where Jeremiah, now 8, was teaching his 5-year-old brother how to throw a lasso, while Elizabeth, 7, supervised with all the authority her age could command. "They're going to be quite the ranchers someday," Hunter observed with pride. "They already are," Zara said. "They've learned from watching you that strength isn't about speed or force, it's about persistence and care." Hunter's arm tightened around her. "They've learned that from both of us." As the sun began to set over the mountains, painting the sky in the same colors it had that day when Hunter had first ridden up to her broken fence, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From a woman fighting alone to save her father's legacy, to a partner in a thriving ranch and a mother of 3, it was a transformation she could never have predicted. And beside her, the cowboy with the bad leg who had fixed her fence slow all those years ago, the man who had shown her that moving carefully was not a sign of weakness but of wisdom. The man who had seen her strength when others saw only her limitations. The man who had become her husband, partner, and the father of her children. As if reading her thoughts, Hunter turned to her, his eyes reflecting the golden light of sunset. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day, when I was fixing your fence?" Zara smiled, the memory as clear as if it had happened yesterday. "I said you moved careful, not weak. You were the first person since the war who saw it that way," he said quietly. "The first person who didn't look at my leg and see only what I couldn't do. And you were the first person since my father died who looked at me and saw what I could build, not just what I was struggling to hold on to," she replied. As darkness settled over the Montana landscape, they turned to go inside where their children waited. The ranch would continue to grow and change in the years ahead, facing new challenges and opportunities. But the foundation they had built, both the physical structures of the Diamond H and the bonds between them, would endure, rooted in the understanding that had begun that day by a broken fence line. That true strength lies not in haste or force, but in moving through the world with care and purpose. And that sometimes, the most powerful partnerships begin when we recognize the careful movement of another soul making their way deliberately through a world that values speed over substance. In the warmth of their home, surrounded by the family they had created, Hunter and Zara Quincy continued to build their legacy one careful, purposeful step at a time.